Welcome to Stardome, episode something. The Milkening Awakens. From the guys who brought you such hits as Who Could Beat the Mountain 1, Who Could Beat the Mountain 2, Who Could Beat the Mountain 3, Who Could Beat the Mountain 4, and currently have Who Can Beat the Mountain 5 in the works, we bring that totally not overused concept to the galaxy far, far away with Who Could and Couldn't Defeat General Grievous, Prequel Jedi Edition. Which Jedi from the prequels would have had the best odds if we sent them to take down this cantankerous clanking cyborg in a fair 1v1? And which Jedi might you think could take him down, but couldn't, and why? Today we look at the best options for can, and if there's demand for it, we'll follow up with the cons. Before we start, let's clear up an important question. Legends or canon? Answer: for most characters we'll probably pull from Legends since that's what we know best, but we might use some feats from canon if there's no short circuits. But for the iteration of Grievous, here's where we run into issues. The character in both canons has one of the least consistent representations in fiction. In fact, it's dedicated video-worthy, wink wink. His effectiveness seems to be determined by whatever the plot needs him to be, which means 1 minute he's the Star Wars equivalent of the T-101, slaying Jedi left, right and center with little anyone can do to stop him, and the next, he's, I would say, Saturday morning cartoon villain, but that's an insult to Saturday morning cartoon villains. He's getting dunked on by Gungans, put it that way. So, to be clear, we're assuming it's Grievous on a day at the former, that being Jedi nightmare fuel, and not the latter, that being an absolute joke.
Any more complaints?
No.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, be one of that all-important first 1,000. And our Discord's here if you want to come and chat. Ignite those sabers, Tom, and let's start crossing blades with the metal monstrosity. First, let's have a look at Grievous's blueprint. What makes him scary, and where is he weak? Grievous is a non-Force user who can match the speed, reflexes, and strength of a Force-enhanced individual, which is bad enough. But that's not the true source of his deadliness. It's in the cybernetic aspects of his mind where Jedi really need to start pissing their pants. To put it simply, Grievous basically has a chess computer inside his head, but for lightsaber dueling. He can look at the form of his opponent, and this computer tells him the best way to counter it in less than a fraction of a second. What's more scary is that this computer learns. So the longer you fight him, the more you educate him in your style and how to beat it. And to add one last layer of suckage, because those first two clearly weren't bad enough, also in how to use it, which for those with custom forms is quite the concern. Another thing to consider with Grievous is his insane size and durability. The squishy bits are protected by a 7-foot-tall robotic frame made up of some of the strongest metals and alloys in the Star Wars universe, strong enough to even withstand minor contact with a lightsaber. A lot of people may think that any old Force user can take Grievous out by simply doing this, or by throwing him around with the Force. But it's very important to note who's actually doing that crush, and how, they are the second most powerful Jedi in the Order. Crushing Grievous's exceptionally durable frame is not an easy thing to do, and really not on the cards for all but the strongest of Force users. Even pushing and pulling him with the Force is problematic because his claws allow him to anchor himself to a surface, requiring some seriously powerful telekinesis to offset the power of that grip and unstick him. And these aren't even the biggest feathers in the General's cap, because that honor belongs to fear. Grievous in the old lore would wield fear as a sharpened blade, fond of breaking off engagements and then striking from the shadows, using his nightmarish physical form to intimidate and picking off the weakest members of a party with casual ease. He could backfoot even the best of the Jedi at times, as the terror he would invoke would often hamper their ability to reach out to the Force. It seems Yoda was indeed correct. Fear does in fact eventually lead to suffering. And that suffering is getting cut to ribbons by a four-armed cyborg. Speaking of which, 4 arms, each one wielding a lightsaber. Don't think we need to go into much depth as to why that might be advantageous. It's intimidating, unorthodox, and quite an effective fluster tactic. Though, it should be noted Grievous relies on this unorthodoxness quite a bit, as his raw skill and technique is somewhat subpar. If you start depriving him of his sabers, or force him to fight more conventionally, he starts losing the upper hand. Literally. Hello there. Shh, not now, Kenobi. Later. So, that's where he's strong, but where is Grievous vulnerable? The main weakness is he lacks the Force in its entirety, so he can't really defend against a good push or pull if you've got the strength to do it, or, like Yoda, understand that size matters not. Guess that rules you out, farm boy! He can only tank it, or as previously mentioned, try to mitigate it by anchoring himself to the ground with his claws. While it's not officially confirmed, he's also likely very vulnerable to lightning. Ooh, foreshadowing. I just can't see Sidious and Dooku not having purposely engineered this weakness into him as a contingency, since as we all know, Sidious was fond of this failsafe in his murderous cyborgs. I wonder why. And I'm not just saying this based on thin air either. Every time we see this guy get shocked by something, he really doesn't seem to like it. The lack of connection to the Force also hampers him in regards to reacting to a Force-tuned individual. His computer can tell him the most logical ways to react, but it can't hold up to the energy of life itself guiding movements. This makes him bad at dealing with the unorthodox or unpredictable, and any opponent that can fully place their trust into the Force to guide them can often get one up on him. With all that said, let's see who can flip the switch and say GG to... GG. I see what you did there, Tom. Well done, good show. Puns galore. Our first choice at number 5, Master Kit Fisto. Fisto and Grievous actually had a small tussle in the 3D Clone Wars, but calling it a proper fight is a little generous to say the least. But what if Fisto had to fight to the death? I'd definitely put my credits on him deactivating the devious cyborg. Fisto gets dunked on quite a bit because of... But it's kind of key to note that is the most powerful Sith of all time he's falling to, and unlike Mace, Kit doesn't have a dark side channeling lightsaber form, meaning he took the full brunt of that Force scream and still managed to get his weapon up to defend himself for a brief, and I mean brief, moment. And it can even be argued he only fell so quick because his chosen lightsaber form is the worst possible form for fighting a highly skilled single blade wielding opponent like Sidious. To be honest, the fact he defends himself at all is actually kind of impressive in a visually pathetic sort of way.
Good job.
But Fisty Boy is genuinely no slouch. He's an immensely powerful Force user, a high-ranking swordmaster, and he brings the right tools in his saber skills and approach to the Force to deal with the General. Kit Fisto is his era's reigning master of Form 1 Shii-Cho. The first form taught to all Jedi, it's seen as somewhat of a baby form in its base incarnation. It emphasizes very simple movements coupled with wide sweeping attacks that promote area denial and holding multiple opponents at bay. However, when taken to mastery, Shii-Cho is the battlefield Jedi's best friend. A master learns to release themselves into the Force and trust it to guide their movements. Something that we know screws with Grievous's ability to predict and react. The master then begins to thrive in the chaos and becomes an unstoppable whirlwind that can plow their way through an army's worth of adversaries. In many ways, a true master of Shii-Cho is just as deadly and unpredictable as a master of Vaapad. Against single, well-trained opponents, Form 1 usually comes up short, as it leaves too many openings when you're fighting in the pocket or toe-to-toe. But Grievous is kind of the exception to this. 1. You don't fight Grievous toe-to-toe anyway. He's just too big, too strong, and too fast to fight safely at that distance. You need to keep the fight moving. And 2. While Grievous is good, he's not great when it comes to actual skill, and relies on flustering his opponents with the chaos of multiple lightsabers coming in from all directions. Do you see where I'm going with this? For Fisto, fighting Grievous wouldn't be fighting a single highly skilled opponent. It would be fighting 4 decently skilled adversaries, something his form is optimized for. It's a classic example of rock, paper, scissors. Kit's rock may be bad against Sidious's paper, but it can smash General Koff's scissors. Just put your faith in the Force, Squid Boy, and you'll be fine. Moving on. At number 4, we've chosen the Jedi Battle Master, Sindralig. Again, he gets a bad rep because he is defeated rather easily by Vader during Operation Nightfall. But like Fisto, you've got to cut him some slack. Remember, at this point in time, Anakin/Vader is considered to be on par with Sidious and Yoda for raw power. And the novel in particular puts emphasis on Dralig's determination to protect the younglings and Padawans, and the fact Vader is backed up by the 501st, who are unleashing storms of blaster fire. It's fair to say he's distracted and being caught massively off guard, and probably could have put up a much stronger fight in a more neutral or isolated encounter like we see in the video game. Sindralig, like Kit, is not a pushover. In fact, the furthest thing from. A powerful Force user, particularly when it came to using the mystical energy field to bolster his physicality, which, you know, kind of handy against a mechanically enhanced cyborg, and thought to be only second to Yoda in knowledge of the 7 classical forms of lightsaber combat. Sindralig is one of the Order's finest warriors during the prequel era. I won't hear it otherwise. It is, at the end of the day, a prerequisite to the title that the Battle Master masters all 7 forms inside and out. Which means, dude knows how to swing his glow stick. And the reason we think he can take down Grievous? Because Dooku basically outright tells us so in Labyrinth of Evil. Of the 4 names Dooku informs Grievous not to around and find out with during the attack on Coruscant, Dralig is one of them. And to be honest, it makes sense. Dralig is basically a living version of Grievous's lightsaber dueling chess computer, and backed by the Force. He can kind of play Grievous at his own game and just keep switching out his forms to adapt to whatever Grievous is doing, all while ramping up his physicality with the Force until it outpaces Grievous's cybernetics, ultimately confusing and flustering the cyborg until something gets through. You don't get to be known as the Order's finest duelist by doing PR runs at the end of the day.
#Justice for Kit and Dralig.
Moving on to our number 3, and it's the magnificent masked menace to droids everywhere, Master Plo Koon. Probably the most underrated Jedi around during the era of the Clone Wars, Plo is exceptionally powerful, both in the Force and with a lightsaber. The Keldor Jedi is a master of both the Djem-So and Shien variants of Form 5 lightsaber combat, a strength-based form centered around heavy defense and counterattack. And unlike Anakin, who just liked to hammer his opponents into submission, Plo employed this form with much more tact and grace, weathering his opponent's assault, then picking the perfect moment for a decisive fight-ending strike. A proven approach for dealing with the General. He must have been pretty good too, since it was once alluded to that he's the only Jedi to have ever beaten Master Yoda in a friendly duel. Though, when you find out where that source comes from, I'm not sure how much stock you want to put in it.
I heard you're one of the only Jedi to have ever beaten Master Yoda in a duel. Ahsoka speaks very highly of you.
But still, even without it, there's more than enough out there to definitively say he's one of the best duelists in the Order. But it's not in swordplay where I think my bro Plo takes the advantage over General Weezus. It's down to the Keldor's Force abilities. Koon is notably powerful in the Force, particularly known for having some mean telekinesis. He might not have the Yoda and Mace levels of magnitude to crush Grievous into a cube of scrap metal, but the lore certainly implies he's on the level that would allow him to bully the cyborg by ragging and throwing him around. And depending on the canon, that's not even the funnest or most effective tool in his arsenal. Oh no. Plo is the only Jedi of his era willing to use Force lightning.
Ooh, foreshadowing payoff.
Called Electric Judgment in effort to persuade Papa Yoda and Mama Windu to let him keep his new toy, Plo could unleash bolts of lightning that could range from the power to stun all the way up to the capacity to kill. Seriously, Plo? You're not fooling anyone, buddy. You can change the color and say goodness brings it forth all you like. I know Force lightning when I see it, you dirty, dirty Sith. And people really thought Jar Jar was the hidden Sith Lord. He hits Grievous with a big enough jolt of that stuff, the cyborg is done for. It would probably fry his circuits, and possibly even the organic parts of his body, depending on how well shielded they are. Force or sabers? Yeah, our boy Plo has got this. And speaking of lightning, let's move on to our lightning pick. At number 2, it's the wise Master Yoda and the powerful Master Windu. I threw them in the same spot because I think we're all agreed here, right? They could probably school the General with their lightsabers or crush him into scrap with the Force. They've both got feats that make a fight with Grievous pretty much a foregone conclusion. So, why not the number 1 spot then? Well, it should be noted Mace had his own input on this. He briefly crossed sabers with Grievous during the attack on Coruscant and was horrified when he realized not only could Grievous's brain computer calculate fairly effective responses to Vaapad, but the cyborg was also starting to be instructed in its use. This is why Mace decides it's better to swap over to the Force. He did not want a chance teaching the rascally robot what is quite possibly the deadliest form of lightsaber combat, and him escaping to unleash it on his fellow Jedi. And this is why Mace cannot be the number 1 choice. Out of everyone here, he's the only one who could not afford to engage Grievous in a long protracted duel with the intention of finishing him off, and then have the cyborg escape. Admittedly more for the sake of others than his own, but still, it's a point against him claiming that optimal choice top spot. Master Yoda has also fought Grievous, but in canon, and it should be noted, despite dominating, he could not bring a swift end to the General with his lightsaber skills, which is really kind of a rare big W feat for Grievous.
You will never defeat Grievous! Never!
And Frogman had to swap over to employing the Force to take the upper hand, and he opted to retreat upon the arrival of a few battle droids, which leads me to believe it's closer than you might think. Regardless of this though, these two clearly have it in the bag. They're just not the best choice for facing down this metalloid monstrosity. And in fairness, it's a hard fight for both of them if they have to take it to the finish. And at number 1, is it really a shock to anyone? It's Coleman Trevor. Grievous doesn't stand a chance against this guy. 360 vision, a Sarisu master, and he's half frigging dinosaur. Nuff said. And for those of you who haven't come over from the fandom, we are of course kidding. It's a tradition of ours in videos like this to have a joke suggestion before the real top spot, and of course, in what will actually come as a shock to no one, the best Jedi to take down General Grievous in the prequel era is the guy who actually took him down.
What?
General Kenobi. Predictable, yes. Cliché, of course. But no matter how you slice it, Obi High Ground Kenobi is the best man for the job, even above the powerhouses of Yoda and Windu. There is a reason he was chosen for the task in the actual story at the end of the day, even with Mace and Yoda there as potential options. When it comes to having the right tools for the job, Kenobi's belt is full when it comes to Grievous. First things first, his mindset. Kenobi is calm, tactically astute, tenacious, and level-headed in even the most perilous of situations. He doesn't charge in blindly or try to power through a situation with force. He remains calm and thinks on his feet very quickly, which in turn makes him nigh on impossible to fluster or rumble with shock and awe tactics, which are at the end of the day Grievous's most effective trick and pretty much his bread and butter. Then there's his lightsaber form. Like Kid Fisto and Shii-Cho, Kenobi isn't just a master of Sarisu, he's the master of Sarisu. Form Free is the ultimate counter to what Grievous brings to the table. Combined with a good dollop of tenacity and the level-headedness we mentioned earlier, the form allows one to weather anything Grievous throws at them, while at the same time giving the Jedi-killing clanker nothing to react to. And lastly, Obi-Wan is one of the few Jedi who puts their faith completely and utterly in the Force, trusting it to guide his movements in their entirety, making him quicker than Grievous's computers can ever hope to be, and at the same time, nearly impossible for anyone not attuned to the living Force to predict. All of this is a recipe for Grievous's doom. Obi-Wan gives himself over to the Force and calmly weathers the storm while giving Grievous nothing to play off in return, which in turn frustrates Grievous and causes him to start getting reckless, ramping up his assault and switching things up in order to get through, which in turn leads to small openings Obi-Wan can take advantage of. And with every opening seized, Grievous only gets more pissed, more reckless, and more deprived of lightsabers until eventually he exposes something vital and boom! The negotiator has negotiated the General's passage to the afterlife. Or whatever the post-life sitch is in Star Wars, the Force I guess. Now, you might want to argue Obi-Wan had a really tough time of it, and he really struggled to finish the cyborg off, and Yoda and Mace wouldn't have had that much trouble. But we should note, the guy loses his lightsaber in the middle of a war zone and is forced to pursue this guy, who for the sake of ending the war cannot be allowed to escape, essentially unarmed. If you look at the portion of the fight when Obi-Wan is sabered up, and compare it to the second half where he's struggling because he's unarmed, it's clear in that first half, he's kind of almost making sport of Grievous. And had he kept a hold of his glow stick, he probably would have finished the General off with practiced ease. I know this pick is a little obvious, because Kenobi is so obviously the best choice. I'm sorry, it's just how the chips fall. And that's our take. Do you agree, or are there Jedi that we missed capable of selling this guy for spare parts at their local junk dealer? Let us know in the comments.